everybody. Today I have another super fun guest with me. Her name is Christina Murphy, and she's an emotional eating and binge eating recovery coach. And she's on a mission to improve as many women's lives as possible by showing them how to love their bodies, eat whatever they feel like, and find happiness in every single day. That sounds so awesome. So thank you so much, Christina, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Okay, so I think binge eating, emotional eating is something that so many women, especially active and fit women, are struggling with, although we don't want to talk about it. So that's why I wanted to have you on so we can discuss these things. And why don't you let us know first, what is your background and why are you talking about binge eating?
Yes, so obviously I have dove into binge eating because I have struggled with it in the past for a very long time. And like you said, I did not want to talk about it to anyone, including my family. It all started, I struggled through high school specifically a lot with being overweight. I wasn't really overweight, but everyone else was really small compared to me. So I was always looking for diets. I think at about the age of 14, I started looking for diets like through magazines because the internet wasn't really as big back then. And I did everything that I could in regards to not eating junk food. And this was really hard through school because I was watching, I guess, a lot of smaller girls who could eat anything. And I was always questioning what was wrong with me. And so that went on all the way until I was about 17. And during this whole time, I had actually been on the contraceptive pill to regulate my periods because the first year I got my period, I had it for 12 months nonstop. And the doctors put me on the contraceptive pill to regulate the periods basically. And at 17, I don't know what come across me, but I just had in my head that I'd been on them for so long that I wanted to make sure that everything was okay and that I could have kids. So I stopped taking them by myself. I just decided to stop taking them because it had been so long at this point that I thought maybe my period would be regulated. And that was the case. But when I come off the pill, I lost a lot of weight. And that was obviously just due to a lot of hormone changes. And I didn't do anything to lose this weight. However, at school, I got praised for that. Like everyone was like, oh my God, you've lost so much weight. You look so good. And then I have a very obsessive personality. So I took that the next step further and thought, well, if I look good now, how good can I look when I actually lose more weight? So I went on a very restrictive, I guess, diet, you could call it, but more specifically, I was just eating as little as possible. And I would eat well under 800 calories a day at some point. And the lowest weight I got down to was about 45 kilos and I'm 163 centimeters. So that was quite small for me. I was very much on the verge of heading towards being anorexic. I had bones showing. I would say it's anorexic, but by medical and everything else doctors, it's not classified as anorexic. And I'd lost my period during all of this time, which is very relevant to your audience. And so that's where the binging started. Once I hit that 45 kilo mark, I remember thinking, I cannot do this anymore. I can't not eat. I can't starve my body. I can't lose that next kilo because I was so emotionally and mentally drained. This had gone on for about a year of not eating much food at all. And so when I started to eat food again, of course, everything kicked in. I was just hungry all the time. My body obviously just wanted food and I just couldn't stop eating at that point. And initially it was just normal eating, but then it turned into binge eating because I was upset that I was putting on weight. I didn't like that I was gaining body fat back onto me because at 45 kilos, I still didn't think that I was skinny. I was really struggling with my body image and thought that I was still overweight at 45 kilos. So to start eating and putting on weight, that was really, really hard mentally. And that's when the binge and emotional eating started. And it went on for a very long time. And it initially was, not so healthy foods. And then that transformed into, okay, I'm going to eat healthy foods. But then I would binge on healthy foods too, like Greek yogurt and almonds and just anything you could think of because they were healthy. I told myself it was okay. even though it made me really sick, my stomach would hurt. I would hide it from my parents. So I deep down knew that it wasn't good for me. It was making me feel sick, but that took a long time to recover from that. That took a few years because I wasn't talking to anyone on social media. People weren't really talking about it or that I was aware of. And I just thought that there was something wrong with me. And so I hid it for a long time, didn't try to fix it for a long time. I just let it keep going. And then that's when I eventually become a PT for my own health. I didn't become a personal trainer to train people. I wanted to do it for myself. And obviously I fell in love with helping people, and I always began training people with, if I can just pass something on to someone else that they didn't know, that I'm helping them. And that's all I wanted during my journey, was for someone to help me. So that was about 6 years ago now. And during that time, I did still struggle with binge eating as a personal trainer, because I then had a lot more pressures on my body image from thinking that I needed a six-pack, or now I guess it would be the best booty. And I had those pressures coming from social media, which was pressures I was putting on myself to look like what I was seeing on social media, because at this time I didn't have any knowledge about people taking dieting down for photo shoots and all of that sort of stuff. I just thought that people look like that all the time because they weren't talking about the fact that they don't look like that all the time, or that they may not have their period, or that they may be binge eating as well. So it did take a long time through my personal training years, because they that sort of brought me back into the binge eating stage. But eventually I started to learn more about the fitness industry, about how people work in regards to competing, in regards to not everyone is healthy, even if they look like they are fit and healthy. And that really helped me with my own body image. And that allowed me to eventually transform into intuitive eating. And then that's where I've landed where I am today, helping other women who have gone through what I went through with binge and emotional eating, and showing them the ropes as to how they can live a better life if we aren't always focused on our body image, basically, and therefore not emotional and binge eating because of it.
Mm-hmm. So how many years ago did all this happen? I mean, and maybe I should ask it this way. How many years have you been free from binge eating?
So I would have been, I think, 4 years, 4 to 5 years now. Yep. So it would have been about 2 years into my personal training. I was still struggling with it. And then I started to become free of it after then, and working towards becoming free of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So did you get any professional help from anyone, or did you just recovered, by reading, by listening to stuff? How did it go?
Yeah, so I didn't get any professional help. I live in a small town in Australia. We have about, I think, 7,000 people in our town, and we are close to cities, but just a smaller town mentality is, I guess we just don't have the options available to go and see someone just around the corner. And then I also wouldn't have even known who to see, to be honest, when I was struggling during that time. So I did do everything by research. When I initially started researching, not a lot of people were talking about it, so it was very, very hard. But over the years that I was struggling with binge and emotional eating, more people started to talk about it on social media, and also body image, and that really, really helped me during my journey. But it wasn't a straight line. It was very much a roller coaster. And I guess I just implemented small things that I was learning one by one, and then I would sort of go from there. Did it work? Did it not work? And then I would pivot my direction if something wasn't working. And if something was working, then I'd test with it a bit longer just to see if it was more sustainable for me. And that's what it come down to in the end, to my recovery, is this something I can see me doing for the rest of my life? Because I had got to a point where a lot of the stuff, I knew that I wouldn't want to do it for much longer than a week. So I gave up on doing all of that and just focused on what felt good for me. And yeah, that was all via research and listening to other people's stories mainly, and what worked for them.
I think you made such a good point. I mean, I want everybody to know that if you have binge eating disorder or any weird habits, relationships with food, you can recover from it, because I know how it can feel like I'm never going to be able to come out of this. But you absolutely can. And you are such a great example of this. So can you pinpoint some of the most common reasons why people start binge eating and struggle with it for so many years?
Yeah, so two of the main reasons, I think that there's typically two big reasons that we're struggling with this at the moment. And the first one would, of course, be restriction, like my story was. And that is, restriction doesn't always mean just eating nothing. Restriction can mean not eating enough for your body. So that is very, very different for every individual. And we're in a diet sort of culture at the moment where diets were popular, say maybe 10 years ago, but now we've got women and men who have been dieting for years and years, and they've never had a break from eating low calories for their body, and their bodies are adapting to this, but that doesn't mean it's healthy for you. So restriction is a big one, because our bodies are telling us when we're hungry, when we're full, and you start to lose those when you've been following meal plans for a long time, when you've been counting your calories or macros for a long time, just whenever you've been doing stuff that isn't listening to those natural signals. And then we end up binge eating, typically due to the fact that we're hungry, like our body is physically hungry, or we are restricting for 1 week, binge eating for the next, then we go back onto a diet the next week. And it's just this up and down cycle. And then also we can binge eat from dieting, because typically we diet because we want to change our bodies. And then a lot of women, I know I did this, start binge and emotional eating because we've done so well for, say, 2 months or 3 months and no results have happened. So we fall into a binge eating or emotional eating cycle. And you may do that for a couple of months and then go back on a diet for a couple of months to try and undo that, what you've done during your binge eating time. And then it just is up and down, up and down. So I do believe that dieting, or just restrictive eating and not eating what your body needs to be a healthy person internally, not just externally. And then the other big reason is due to, if someone is struggling with emotional eating and binge eating specifically, who hasn't had a big history of dieting, then it can come from an emotional reason. So initially that may have started off with an emotional trauma. Something may have happened in their life, like something bigger. We all know we have family trauma. And then it could be something like you lost your job and you were bored for a couple of weeks before you found your next one, and you started eating when you were bored. Now, what happens now is that becomes a habit every time you feel that emotion. So typically it doesn't matter what the initial emotion was that caused you to start binge eating from it. It's the fact that now every time that emotion comes up in you, you go to food because it worked the first time and made you feel good for a little bit during that first time you felt the emotion. So now every time you're bored, you go back to the cupboard because you know it makes you feel good for a few minutes or however long that binge goes on for. And so then it becomes, a real habit, as opposed to, you may not know that you're doing it due to these emotions, but you may also not be aware that it's a habit. And you may be blaming yourself and saying that you just binge eat when you get bored, as opposed to realizing it's not you and it's not your fault, but it is a habit, and all habits can be changed and you can heal from those habits. Like you were saying before, you can absolutely heal if you are struggling with binge or emotional eating.
Yeah. I think also part of it is that we start to identify as I'm a binge eater.
Yes.
This is what I do. And it kind of like, okay, that's me again. Here I am binging it. Here we go. Kind of like normalize it, and kind of like throw in the towel and be like, okay, I'm giving up. That's who I am. There's nothing to do about it. But there is.
Absolutely. Yeah. We need to, with everything in our life, and this could be even something like when you're going to the gym, you may be in a habit of just sitting on the lounge thinking about going to the gym for hours, and then you just say, oh, I'm just a lazy person, or I'm just not a gym person. That is just us telling and identifying ourselves as that person, but you are the person you want to be. And these are all just things you're telling yourself, and you're putting limiting beliefs on you, whereas you just have a habit of doing these things, as opposed to you are actually that person. You can always change the direction and your habits and also your mindset towards who you are and who you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. So one interesting thing that you also mentioned was that we may unknowingly restrict ourselves. So
Yes.
maybe we never ate like 800 calories per day, but we think that we're eating totally normal. We're maybe, hitting like 1800, which I think is still on the lower side for a very active woman.
Yeah.
But maybe there are women who think that, okay, this is fine. I work out for 1 hour. I'm eating, okay, let's say even 2000 calories. And can this still be too little for you or for this person? And how do you know it?
Yes. So I think, and one of the big ways this begins is someone may start working out as their first way to get healthier or change their body, whatever their goal is. And with working out, they think that they need to eat less. And so it starts right from the beginning in this really low calorie drop. So they decide to eat healthier, which in return, probably they're eating less calories overall, and they're going to the gym. So they're most likely, every single woman I have coached, I have only ever had one woman who was eating too much for their body. Every single other woman has been eating too little for their body and also their activity levels. So it is something that's hard to, I guess, if you're unaware of it, know that you should just start eating more. But that is when, I guess, intuitive eating really allows you to fall into knowing if you are or you aren't eating enough. When we are tracking our food or trying to restrict or follow a meal plan that's maybe just a very generic meal plan, it's hard to listen to your body. You really do lose those hunger and fullness signals. And that can, therefore, you may struggle to know if you aren't eating enough. However, if you are someone who can really start to dive into feeling how food makes you feel, if you are hungry, if you are full, you're going to start to know when you do a hard training session if you haven't eaten enough for the day, because you're going to get quite hungry either afterwards, or you're going to have other signals like you're really fatigued or your body isn't recovering well after a session. So there's a lot of signals that we can start to listen to understand if we are actually eating enough for our bodies. And then also one of the bigger ones is like for your audience, losing their periods. Many of us think that this is normal and it happens to so many women and we don't do anything about it. But that is a huge sign to us. So there are so many signs and everybody's very different. Obviously, we're all individual, but you do need to take a look at your overall life and just really understand and dig deeper into things like if you've lost your period, why is that happening? Are you overtraining? Aren't you eating enough? And other things that may be happening to you and your body that you have just taken as a normal thing. Try and understand and just dig a little deeper and think outside the box as to whether it could be food related or overtraining related just in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have to admit it. I mean, if you're feeling like just like super crappy, you're not recovering. I mean, the things there could be, maybe you're not sleeping to recover well, which can also be caused by under eating, by the way, like it was in my case, or overtraining. And so, yeah, it's so important to start paying attention to our body and how it feels. And it's interesting too how hard workouts sometimes can suppress our appetite. I have noticed it myself. And then we're not eating afterwards because we kind of take advantage of it and feel really good. And see, I don't have to eat anymore, but it always catches up on you later.
Yes, absolutely. And that is when you typically will hit a burnout stage where you start to resent the gym even because you may not directly link it to the gym, but you do start to resent things that are taking a lot of energy out of you because you aren't fueling your body for those activities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. So what would you say are the first steps towards getting out of this cycle of binge and restrict?
Well, it definitely starts with why you're doing it in the first place. So like I mentioned before, it could be simply an emotional thing, starting from an initial trauma. And you may not be a dieter, but if you are a dieter, it could be from restriction. and not eating enough for your body. So I think if you are struggling with binge or emotional eating, you need to take some time, and it's not going to happen in just one 10-minute session of you sitting down with yourself, but you really do need to take some time to check in with your mind and your body and try to understand what is causing these binges and emotional eating. And you may not know. I know in my journey, I could tell you that it was because I wasn't happy with my body. I didn't know that restriction was adding to that, but I knew I wasn't happy with my body. But then some people may not know. So you will need to take some time before and after those binge sessions to actually really reevaluate what happened for me to just do that. And we will find, for every individual, you will be able to find a root cause. It may be one root cause, it may be a few, and you may also not understand where it's coming from. And that's typically going to be when you are struggling from restriction, if it's not just an emotional cause for the binge. But yeah, we really need to learn how to check in with ourselves and our bodies and find that root cause that is far beyond just I binge because I'm a binge eater, or I binge because I can't stop eating chocolate, and work out why we aren't happy, what is going on within our body to cause those negative emotions, and what is going on within our life that we may need to take steps towards changing in our lifestyle in order for those binges to happen, because those binges are a result of something you're not happy with. It's not because your body wants to binge eat, or because you have just decided to binge eat because you're a fat and lazy person, which is what you might be telling yourself. It is because something in your life isn't going right, whether that is because you're restricting. But why are you restricting? Are you restricting because you need to lose weight, because you want to lose weight, you want to change your body? And then from there, you have to go, why do I want to change my body? Why do I want to put my body through all of this negative stuff, as opposed to just focusing on being healthy? So it's digging deep under those superficial layers of what you may just say your answer is, and then going further into solving the root cause of why we're starting to binge eat. And it is hard to do by yourself. It is very, very hard. I now know that I would have preferred to have gone through it with a coach, because I think they would have helped me get there quicker. But it is definitely possible for you to do it by yourself, but you have to be open to putting in the work and understanding that it's not going to stop overnight either, that it is a journey, and you will have ups and downs where you do binge eat during that time. You can't just flick it off overnight.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes really big changes.
Yes.
Like, I would just quickly like to share my experience. Of course, part of why I was binging, and I've been free from it like also for 4 or 5 years now. Okay, yeah, part of it was that I was just running so much and not eating enough. So that's one huge thing. But another one, actually, there's two. I was so unhappy with my job at the time. I did not like what I was doing, the tiniest bit. And I remember just staring at my computer and thinking, okay, I have to finish this PhD, I have to do it. But do I like it? And I didn't even ask this question for myself, because I thought that this is what I'm supposed to do. I already started this PhD program. I have to finish it. And then the other one was just, I was in a really bad relationship, and it wasn't like, it wasn't abusive or any of those things, but it was just like emotionally didn't give me anything. And I was looking this satisfaction from somewhere else.
Yes. And I can actually relate. It is hard because those big changes they're huge. Like, they're life-changing decisions. And to admit that you don't like your job, that's a huge thing, because it's not an overnight change, but it does give you direction as to you can start working towards something else that you would prefer to work in that industry. But in regards to the relationship, during my struggles with binge eating the first time, I was in a relationship with my high school partner, who we were with for 5 years, but we'd both grown up together, and towards the end of the relationship, it wasn't a happy one. And like I said, it wasn't like it wasn't abusive or anything, but it wasn't a relationship that was good or positive or doing anything for either of us. And therefore, I was gaining emotional satisfaction from food instead of actually addressing the problem of the relationship. And if I had have done that sooner, then that binge eating may it not have been as bad as it actually was. And it is such a huge thing to look at your relationships, your job, even your relationships with your friends, the activities you're doing. Are you doing activities that make you happy outside of work? All of these things are huge life-changing items that you can look at in your life, but it's so necessary in order for you to understand why you have this binge eating coming off as a side effect. And that is what it is. It's typically a side effect of something that's happening in our life. It's never just we're binge eaters.
Yes, it's not really about food. There's
no, not at all.
There can be totally different things underlying there. Yeah, so next question is going to be about intuitive eating. So you are an intuitive eater, right?
Yeah, so it's not intuitive eating something I feel weird to label because it's just how we eat. It's how animals eat. They intuitive eat. But it is something we label just solely so we can talk about it and everyone knows what we're talking about. But intuitive eating is what I do. I don't think about food or numbers or anything like I used to before.
Do you think, we have to call it something, right?
Yeah.
So let's say intuitive eating, would you say that this is the way to our optimal body, to our optimal healthy body and the body composition? Is that the way to achieve these things?
I do. Yeah, I 100% believe body composition is a bit of a hard one. Optimal body composition for me is what's healthy for you. Optimal body composition for someone who's competing is going to look different. But then in the same terms, not everyone should be a competitor. I know it's very popular at the moment with Instagram specifically. However, it doesn't mean it's healthy. Just because you have a six pack or you look a certain way that in their fitness industry we determine to be healthy, that doesn't mean it is healthy. So to me, optimal body health is whatever your body weight lands at, where it sort of self-regulates. Typically for everyone, it is going to be a healthy weight. It may not look the exact way you want it to. It's what you may hear people refer to as a set point weight. It's what you get to after. Once you get into the intuitive eating world, it may take you a year or so to get to, but it's what your weight sort of lands at, where you may fluctuate up and down here and there, but typically that's where your body has its period. It's where you feel really good. It's where you can eat food without putting on a ton of weight, and your food will go up and down depending on whether you've had a hard session or whether you haven't trained that day. And then that's when intuitive eating comes into it. Your body tells you, if I've sat around all day coaching people on the laptop, I'm not going to be as hungry as if I'd done a really hard session and also been up and moving that day. And to me, that's healthy for my body to tell me that I don't need as much food that day. And then for the days that I do train, to tell me that, hey, you really need to eat today. And I think that that is the most optimal for health, because following a strict meal plan or macros doesn't allow for those variations that your body's telling you. And your body is always out to be its best self and to survive in the moment. And if you can't listen to those signals, or you're not listening to them because you are following a strict regime, I guess, in regards to eating, you're losing out, in my opinion, on your body doing its natural job.
Right. So what if there's someone who's listening and saying that, okay, this all sounds super good, but for example, why is my BMI, high enough to put me in the overweight category? Is this really normal? Is this really where I'm supposed to be? My body naturally wants to sit there at, say, BMI like 27, 28. Do I really have to accept it?
Yeah, so I do think when you are coming from a place of, say, you've been restricting or dieting or whatever the reason is that you were binge eating, if you are then going into a more intuitive eating approach and you're leaving that binge eating behind, you're starting to accept food, you may put on weight depending on what your position is. If you're underweight or many other factors, you may put on weight, and then you will get to a point that may be heavier than you would like it to be. And if it is unhealthy heavier, and I mean like not just you looking in the mirror and thinking that you don't look good, because that's to everyone's interpretation. You could be really healthy and think that you look obese. But if it is an unhealthy weight and you do need to lose weight in order to be healthy, that is possible, but you have to get to that point where you've got to your set point weight, where your body's healthy, you've got your period, you're not overtraining, you're doing it healthy. And then as long as you are on the right track, your body can lose excess body fat if you're at an unhealthy range. But in regards to unhealthy and what you want your body to look like, they're two very different things. And also keeping in mind that the BMI does not include muscle. And so it is a very outdated, in my opinion, number. So I know that I am a lot heavier now than I was when I remember being told I was healthy on the BMI chart. I have no idea what I am now, but I'm heavier via muscle. And so you need to keep in mind, if you are weight training, you are putting on muscle, that BMI may not be a direct reflection of whether you are healthy and whether your body is healthy compared to what it's telling you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So would you say that intuitive eating works for everybody?
I personally think it does. I have yet to find someone who hasn't fallen in love with it once they get the right approach and, get past the hard stages. I don't necessarily know that everyone right now, maybe listening to this, is in the right place, because you do have to get mentally and emotionally to a place where you can let go of focusing on your body. That's not going to happen overnight. But if I had someone come to me right now who was they'd only maybe done one diet, they weren't over it, believed that all the quick fixes were real, that they would work, and that they were just obsessed with losing weight, there's some mindset work that probably needs to start there before someone dove into intuitive eating the next day. And the other thing is that when you start to intuitive eat, it doesn't have to be an overnight decision. When I started to intuitive eat, I was counting macros at that time before I dove into intuitive eating. And I allowed myself one day a week to not track. And then that became 2 days a week. And when I seen that I wasn't becoming an elephant overnight in regards to my body, it gave me the confidence that I knew how to eat for my body. And eventually I stopped tracking macros altogether. But that wasn't an overnight decision. That was me understanding where I was, that I was scared to stop tracking macros, that I didn't have the confidence in myself that I wouldn't just eat everything in sight, but doing it step by step by just gradually letting myself do it 1 day a week to 2 days a week, eventually to every day, every week. And that allowed me to see that it wasn't scary and that I could do it. So I do believe intuitive eating can work for everyone. That's how we're designed to eat, in my personal opinion. Listening to our body, it tells us what's best for us. But where you are right now may depend on whether you want to ease into it or whether you want to do some mindset work before you jump into it. And so it's not as scary for you.
Right. So one kind of principle of intuitive eating is that we can eat everything, right? There's no foods that are off limits. So my question is, there's been a lot of discussion around how some foods are, I don't want to say addictive because I don't believe it, but some foods are designed the way that once we start, we want to eat more of them. Take some chips or whatever, like once you open the bag, there's no way back. Right?
Yep.
So how can someone, avoid this from happening? Okay, say that we're thinking, okay, there's no bad foods, no good foods. These chips are just chips. Let's go ahead and have a few, but still, you can't have just a few, and then the cycle starts again.
Yes. So that's a really good question. I was petrified of this as well. But I teach my clients, and it's what I focus on all the time, is your satisfaction level when it comes to eating. So when you're intuitive eating or just eating, you want to eat foods that make you feel really, really good. And for the most part, that's going to be, you know, your whole food, your natural food, your fruits and veggies. But then you can eat chocolate or say chips. And if you're someone who, for me, I used to be able to eat just normal dairy milk chocolate. Let's use that as an example. Could eat the whole block. But when I started intuitive eating, what I started realizing was it didn't satisfy me. And satisfaction for me is that food makes me feel good, that I don't need to eat the whole block of it. And therefore that specific chocolate wasn't satisfying me personally, because what I take as a satisfying food is something that I can enjoy. For example, cheesecake. I love cheesecake. So I can sit down and have one slice of cheesecake and I can enjoy it. It satisfies my, say, sweet tooth, if that's what I'm craving. And then I can move on with my day. Now, if I'm taking something like a bag of chips and I can't just eat a handful of them, they're typically what I would call more of a trigger food for you. And that's something I would say to just stay away from initially if you can't control yourself around them, and learn to understand what satisfaction is for your palate. Finding foods that really satisfy you and you don't have to eat so much of them that you feel sick. And when you start to learn how to do this with other types of food that aren't trigger foods for you, because trigger foods may, like you said, you don't believe in the addiction, may be a habit. Up here, we have mentally connected that we can't eat chips without eating the whole bag. So I say to learn what satisfaction is for you and your palate, and being able to eat foods that you've held off for so long. And once you can start to learn that they satisfy you, you will be able to come back to those packet of chips and say, have a handful, and that will do you, because you don't need to eat the whole packet. So I agree that some foods can, I guess, appear addictive to people, but I think that that addictive nature comes from the deeper layers that we were talking about before, and that everyone can eat a piece of chocolate or chips or something without eating the whole bag or the whole block. It just comes down to learning how to listen to that satisfaction level when you're eating, as opposed to just mindlessly eating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but what does your diet look like? And do you discuss it with your clients? Are you focusing still mostly on whole foods? Do you encourage them to eat mostly whole foods, real foods, or you're just like, eat whatever, girl, just do what you like? What's your approach?
My approach is, my everyday eating looks different every single day. And so it's not some weeks I may eat more foods that I guess aren't whole foods, and then other weeks I won't. And that will depend on, am I on holiday? Do I have my period? Just so many different factors play into that. So every single day looks different for me. I focus on eating foods that make me feel good in regards to energy, because I want to live my best life possible. Typically they will be whole foods, but then sometimes a piece of cake or something may be what I want. And if that's going to give me energy because I'm not eating the whole cake and it's going to make me tired, then that's okay too. I teach my clients about whole foods because typically people aren't eating enough, specifically vegetables, throughout their day just in general. So it is important to make sure that you are eating enough of those foods. But as long as you are eating enough of those whole foods, then I don't mind about the other stuff. If you aren't eating cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and forgetting about the vegetables, then I don't really have a problem with what my clients are eating, as long as they are getting in enough nutritional value through whole foods. And we don't look at it on a day-to-day basis, because some days you aren't going to do that. Some weeks you aren't going to do that. We just look at it as knowing what whole foods are, how they make you feel. Do they make you feel good? Do they fuel you? We know that they're really good for our bodies, so we want to eat a good amount of them. But as long as we're getting those in, everything else that comes in on top of that, I don't focus on really too much at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so something that everybody is curious about and want to know, especially HA community, does intuitive eating lead to weight loss? I know that in your case it did, and would you share with us what happened, how it happened?
Yes, so It can and it may not, depending on the person, and also depending on where you are coming from, where you're starting on when you start to dive into intuitive eating. For me, it did lead to get into the body I have now, but before that, it led to weight gain. So when I did start to first intuitive eat, I did put on weight, not a lot of weight. Some people may put on more, but eventually, as I started to get into intuitive eating for a longer period of time, after say 12 months to a year and a half, my body did start to lose some weight after that. But that come from, for me personally, that come from a lack, not stressing as much anymore about my food or my body image. And I really started to let go of all of the stress that I had, because stress plays such a big role in your hormones and all of everything in your life. And I can stress really easily. So it was a big deal in regards to letting go of all those conditions I'd put onto myself to look a certain way, to try and keep up with everyone in the fitness industry to what I believed their standards were. And then once I did let go of that and started focusing on my sleep, my stress, self-care, all of those certain things, that all then played into my intuitive eating. Because it wasn't just the food then, it was, I started to look at all the other aspects of my life, and then they started to get me on the right track in regards to having some of that weight coming off. But in regards to weight loss, intuitive eating is not something you should get into if you just want to lose weight. It's not another diet. It's not another diet that you say it's a lifestyle. It is a actual way that you are going to eat. It's something that is going to be up and down. It's going to be up and down with your hormones, with whether you're getting enough sleep, with learning to listen to your body. If you've lost your period, you're going to probably put on weight initially, even more so. And if you're overtraining, so every single person's different. Some people are going to lose weight if they are in a certain place, and then other people are going to put on weight if they're in a certain place. And yeah, there's no black or white, you will lose weight or you won't lose weight. Intuitive eating should be focusing on your health and getting your body healthy first and foremost.
I love it so much. And I see a lot of people kind of misusing this term, I think intentionally. You know, a lot of those weight loss, fat loss people who are telling you that, oh, this is intuitive eating, but, and there's always going to be like 10 like conditions, you know,
and that's what I was saying before. Like, I don't tell my clients you have to eat 80% whole foods and 20% whatever you want. There's no percentage on it. It's just educating yourself around what foods are healthy for your system in regards to nutritional value. Like, so you make sure you aren't skipping out on them, because, you know, they are healthy, but it's not, you have to eat this much a day. You don't have to eat any amount a day. Every day is going to look different, and every person is going to look different as well. So intuitive eating doesn't come with a set of rules. It can't come with a set of guidelines in regards to a coach or someone helping you learn what signs to look out for, like fullness, fatigue, and all those sort of signals, so you know what to look out for. But it shouldn't come with you have to eat this many vegetables, you have to eat this much fruit, you can't eat this much chocolate sort of thing. It is very intuitive, and everyone's different, so you can't put guidelines on it.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that counting, whether it's calories, whether it's macros, is it always unnecessary, and is it always a bad thing in your opinion?
I don't necessarily know it's a bad thing. I know when I was tracking macros, I thought that it was a good step, and I'd convinced myself that it was a good step to intuitive eating because I was doing it. And macros are very, very highly, I guess, relatable in the fitness industry. Every person I know almost does track macros. And for me personally, I don't think it was a necessary step. Now I am where I am now, and how I coach my clients, I have yet to have a client who actually tracks macros first. So I don't think it's a necessary step, because if anything, if you have a nature like I did in regards to binge and emotional eating, macros just made it worse. It just heightened the ability to put rules and restrictions on myself and thinking that I had to lead by that. And then every weekend I would end up overeating because I was allowed to. And I didn't associate any of that with binge eating because it was within my macro limits. And I do think if you're someone who doesn't currently track macros, that it's not a necessary step for you, especially if you are someone who is a dieter or struggles with that emotional eating. I think it is the best step to actually avoid going into tracking macros, because I think it is just another thing that you have to learn and then unlearn once you start to be an intuitive eater. You have to unlearn all of those numbers that you have in your head anyway, because you do start to know without a calorie counter what things are. So you have to unlearn all of those things when you start to listen to your body, instead of looking at an apple as a certain amount of calories and carbs. So I think that if you don't currently track macros, it is not a necessary step. However, I do think if you are currently tracking macros and you think it is impossible to stop, that it is 100% possible, because I tracked macros for about 2 years, and I do wish that I have gone straight into intuitive eating as opposed to tracking the macros. And I think that personally tracking macros is most likely best just for someone who's competing, who has actual numbers that they should be hitting for a competitive level, for whatever a sport they're doing. But if you're focusing on your health of your body, I don't think that macros is a step that you need to take at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we are coming up on time. Is there anything else you would like to add and I didn't ask you?
I think that we've covered a fair bit, which is really good. But I think that the main thing is that if someone who's listening to this is struggling with binge and emotional eating, it can feel like you're never going to stop. But just knowing that it's one step at a time, and that it is digging past those superficial layers of what you think is wrong and going a little bit deeper into that with yourself or with a family or friend or a coach, whoever it is, and just finding out what other factors in your life are causing these things to start in the first place, and then using that as your guide from there forwards.
Right. So if there's someone who wants to work with you, how can they do that?
So the best way to find me is at christinamurphy.com.au. I have all of my services over there. And if you want to just connect with me on social media and see more posts and stuff, the best place to find me is on Instagram at Food Freedom Sisterhood.
Nice. Okay, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. So much information, and I'm really sure all of my listeners will appreciate it. So thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.